Oh boy. Today we're going to be reading something really depressing, but really good. On the Beach by Nevil Shute. The premise of this book is that an accidental nuclear war has basically condemned everyone in the world to die a slow, painful death. While the conclusion is largely foregone, this largely deals with how people try to deal with it, pretend it's not happening, and the overall tone of the novel is generally one of quiet acceptance and quiet resignation at the coming end of the world. This novel was published in 1957, when the world came closer to a nuclear exchange over a stupid proxy war, far more close than most people actually realize today. The events of this novel are very timely for the period of the Suez Crisis, but they're just as important today. The power to end the world over very stupid and, in the book, very sad, tragic, and accidental reasons is one of the main themes. There are no evil overlords. There are no murderous tyrants. Just a bunch of people acting mindlessly mechanical, and together they destroyed all of mankind and most of life on Earth. This was one of the first books to really focus on the idea of nuclear fallout as the main thing that could snuff out most of life on Earth. While some of the science in this book might have been disproven or might be contested, it still was a powerful reminder of the sheer terror that a nuclear exchange would involve. Nevil Shute comes from an engineering background, and according to the science as it was known at the time, some of that largely stands up in the context of that era. Nevil Shute was an Englishman who moved to Australia later on in his life, and most of the novel is set in Melbourne, one of the most southern cities in the world, as the fallout comes closer and closer into the southern hemisphere. This book was adapted into a movie a couple of times, I think, but overall, the ending is completely depressing, and it works well with this book. This is not intended to be a happy ending. This is not a utopian piece of science fiction. At the same time, it's not a strawman dystopia. This is simply a very tragic, very graven, somber kind of read. This is the kind of sobering, self-preventing prophecy I wish more people would pay attention to in science fiction. So, I would recommend you read this book in order to understand some of the tragedies involved with like a mindlessly mechanical war and jumping the gun in geopolitics without knowing the full story. While this is a very sad book, there is very little in the way of outright gore or violence, largely implied and sad in the background. I would recommend this book, but just keep in mind the tone before you pick it up. It might not be what you're after if you want a happy adventure story or a really dark fantasy epic or anything. This is a much more realistic, much more sober type of fiction. That said, I hope to see you next time here at the School of Night.